Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. Thanks for tuning in. Ham Talk Live will be on the air shortly. Please stand by. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by Tower Electronics. For connectors, cables, and more, call 920-435-2973 or visit pl-259.com. And by the Ham Station. Get your new radio or antenna by calling 800-729-4373 or go to hamstation.com.
It's Ham Radio.
Good evening, everyone. This is Ham Talk Live, episode number 22. Tonight we have Glenn Johnson, W0GJ, talking about DXpeditions and his all-software-defined Radio Shack, recorded live on Thursday, July 14th, 2016. I'm your host, Neil Rapp, WB9VPG. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Ham Talk Live. This evening, Glenn Johnson, W0GJ, is going to talk about his 100% software-defined radios in his shack and also his DXpedition experiences. We will take your calls live in just a few minutes. Last week on the show, Will Jourdain, AA4WJ, and Jim Wilson, K5ND, were here to talk about scouting with ham radio. If you missed the show, you can listen anytime. All you have to do is go to hamtalklive.com. You can also catch us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, TuneIn, SoundCloud, or even YouTube. Get all your questions ready to go. After the interview, you can call us on Skype. That username to call is HamTalkLive, or you can call us by telephone. That phone number is 812-NET-HAM1, 812-NET-HAM1, 812-638-4261. You can also tweet a question. Our Twitter handle is @HamTalkLive, so get those questions all ready to go. Before we get started with the show tonight, I do have one last-minute piece of sad news to report. My uncle, Ed Hayes, AA9EE of Mount Vernon and Decatur, Illinois, became a silent key earlier this morning. Ed loved to be on HF with his 10-Tech Paragon and being on CW. When he became ill a few years ago, the family gave me his bencher paddles to use, and those are going to stay in my shack in remembrance of him. Ed was one of the kindest men I've ever met. He was a great storyteller. He loved to tell all kinds of stories, and we will miss him greatly. So AA9EE is now a silent key. So next we are talking DX and software-defined radios with Glenn Johnson right after this word from the Ham Station right here on Ham Talk Live. This episode of Ham Talk Live is brought to you by the Ham Station. For 35 years, the Ham Station has brought new and used radios, antennas, accessories, and equipment to the amateur radio community. Give Jeff or Dan a call at 1-800-729-4373 or order online at hamstation.com. HamStation carries all the major brands like ICOM, Yaesu, and Kenwood. Shop from a wide selection of radio scanners, MFJ accessories, Heil Sound products, Mirage and Ameritron amplifiers, Cushcraft antennas, and more. Easy online shopping and fast shipping are waiting for you at hamstation.com or call 1-800-729-4373. The Ham Station, proud to sponsor this episode of Ham Talk Live.
Ham Talk Live with Neil Rapp.
Welcome back to Ham Talk Live. Be sure to visit the Ham Station, hamstation.com, or give them a call at 800-729-4373. They've got you covered for new and used equipment. I was just in there yesterday, as a matter of fact, taking a look at some used equipment for some friends of mine, and they had quite the selection, actually, of some used equipment. Had everything set up right there to try out and check it out before you buy. So give Dan or Jeff a call, 800-729-4373. And speaking of stopping by, be sure to check out the Ham Talk Live Facebook page and Twitter feed. All you got to do is search for Ham Talk Live. Well, tonight Glenn Johnson is with us, and Glenn grew up near Marshalltown, Iowa. After studying forestry at Iowa State, he received his medical degree from the University of Iowa. After an internship in Seattle and residency in orthopedic surgery at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, he spent 5 years in the Air Force in Anchorage, Alaska, and returned to practice orthopedic surgery in Minnesota. And after 30-some years, he's gone full circle. He's back in Iowa working for the Mayo Clinic. Glenn's interest in amateur radio started as a youngster listening to his grandfather's shortwave radio. He was licensed at age 15, and within 3 months had worked all 50 states with a homemade crystal transmitter. He's achieved the #1 honor roll, the 5-band DXCC and 5-band Worked All Zone Awards, and he has co-led major DXpeditions to places like the Kingdom of Bhutan and the Himalayas, Lakshadweep, I hope I said that right, in the Arabian Sea, Secchio Island, and Navassa Island. And his first DXpedition was to Heard Island. He's also been to Malpelo and recently Palmyra. In 2003, Glenn was inducted into the CQ Magazine Amateur Radio Hall of Fame, and in 2012, he was inducted into the DX Hall of Fame. He's been vice president of the Northern California DX Foundation for the past 4 years, and he's also an ARRL Contest Advisory Committee member representing the Midwest Division. Glenn, welcome to Ham Talk Live.
Hi, Neil. Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad you could join us tonight, and we want to start off first talking about your shack. You made a decision that may not be always the most popular decision, but you made a decision to turn your shack 100% software-defined radio. So what led you to that decision to make that switch?
Well, several years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, we moved from the very northwest corner of Minnesota to the very northeast corner of Iowa, where I live now, near Decorah, Iowa, home of Luther College. And I spent 3 or 4 years designing a contest station. We found a QTH, 70 acres on the hilltop with just a perfect takeoff angle in every direction. And when the house became available, we moved in and we put up antennas, got everything done within a year. And my goal was to minimize the complexity, maximize the efficiency, and make things really flexible. And antennas were the most important. I had some big antennas, some full-size phase verticals for 160, full-size 80-meter four-square, some model banders for 30 and 40 meters, and stacked steppers for the other bands on 2 rotating towers. And I do like the contest. And when you have good antennas, many times you hear life is too short for QRP, but when you have good antennas in the contesting, it is a lot of fun. And a couple of years ago at Dayton, I bought a Flex 1500 QRP rig. And I brought that home, and it sat on the desk for a while because it was the summer, and when fall came around, I plugged it in, and I could not believe how good that little radio worked as far as the receive goes. And so then I researched the new 6000 series, and it was almost a no-brainer to go with the 6700 for contesting. I did a complete rebuild of my station. I took everything out, tore everything out, started over from scratch, and with the 6700, there's very few cables. I had a big tub of cables that were left over from all the other interconnecting radios. You could see all the wires that are in wireless. I mean, it's amazing how you add one thing and add another, and it just keeps building. But anyway, the Flex is really simple, very easy to set up. There's no cables now for most things because it uses this digital audio exchange. So everything is digital. There's no place for RF or loops to develop or anything like that. And the nice thing about the Flex radio, you're immersed into the bands with big computer monitors, and even with the Maestro, you can see so much of the spectrum. In fact, you can see where the muff is. Anyway, my shack now has one big, large area of desk space, and I have 3 large 4K monitors that I use for DXing and contesting. And it is an incredible visual experience. Now, my shack isn't all SDR. I've been a ham for 51 years, and it just happened to be at my 50th ham birthday last year that I came across an estate sale. And I had always drooled over Collins equipment as a kid. I could never afford it. And I found at an estate sale an S-Line, and I play with that almost every day too. But that's just an aside. But anyway, the Flex radio is an amazing radio. If you Google November 4 Hotel Yankee and Flex radio, he gave a talk recently at the Frankfurt Radio Club, and Bob McGuire tells how the Flex works. Basically, the radio is not really a radio as we know it because it's not a super heterodyne. All the radios that since Edwin Armstrong invented the super heterodyne 100 years ago have been variants of super heterodynes, but this is totally different. The radio is actually more of a client server, and it measures voltage. In fact, the only filter that the radio has is the antenna that inputs to the box. But the 6700 measures voltage through the entire HF spectrum and above, up to VHF, in what are called bins of 1.3 hertz at a rate of 4 gigabytes. And then initially, all of this analog voltage is converted to numbers, and it's manipulated with mathematics. And so there's no oscillator for phase noise, there's no conversions, no mixers, no filters, there's no distortion because of that. There's an extreme dynamic range. In fact, it's more than can be used. It exceeds reality. And the noise blankers work incredibly well. In fact, one of my friends borrowed a Flex radio during the recent Herd Island DXpedition. He could not hear them and hence couldn't work them. But he borrowed the Flex radio and he heard them and worked them. And he didn't realize how much noise he had in the shack until he used the Flex radio.
And if you'd like to see a picture of this, we do have one on our Facebook page and Twitter feed. And if you go to qrz.com and search Glenn's call sign W0GJ, you've got all kinds of pictures of all this up there too.
And, the only the limiting factor of this radio is the imagination of the programmers that make the software for it.
Yeah, it seems like the possibilities are endless with this, and it's just so easy to be able to take a look at the whole spectrum and just click on whatever part you want and listen. So it's a great thing, and becoming more and more popular as we go. So is there anything you miss about the old Collins gear and the traditional super heterodyne rigs? And are you
initially there was a lot of angst because of no knobs. I mean, really, I remember as a kid, dreaming about radios. You'd count the knobs and the buttons and switches, and you'd think, the one at the most would be the bestest, but it's not always that. But, I have one knob for my when I'm looking at the computer screen, and not just the flex control. It's a knob, it's a VFO, and a couple other functions. And I only have it programmed for volume control and a VFO. And when you think about it, when you play with your radio, 98% of the time you're either using the VFO or the volume control, and very rarely something else once you have it set up. And it's, as the compulsive surgeon that I am, I printed out the manual and I went through it page by page. And I really didn't need to do that because it's so logical and so easy to learn. And it's very ergonomic how things are set up on the screen. And even with the Maestro, which is the interface, is very intuitive. There's very few knobs and buttons on it, but just the essentials. And the platform is anything. It will work on PCs, on Macs, iPads. I even have an app on my iPhone, so I can use my station from my iPhone. And with the Maestro, the Cat5 cable will plug into the radio, and you don't even need a computer, and you can use the Maestro as a complete interface. But the Maestro is wireless. You can use it all over the house. And in fact, if you're in a working DX, you can take your Maestro to the dinner table while with your wife and kids. Your mileage may vary with your family, but you can do that if you want.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great. So what are you most glad to see disappear in this switch? Would it be all the cables, or what were you glad to see go away?
So simplicity is the word for it. It's very easy to set up. There's very few cables, and everything is software. Like the RIDI decoding programs, all of the contest software, almost all of the logging programs now interface with the Flex series. And it's the ultimate beauty of this will be toward the end of this year, fourth quarter, when version 2 comes out, which will be complete, remote from anywhere in the world with your Maestro or computer. When you load up the software, basically every computer in your house becomes a Flex radio. Every laptop, every computer can access the radio and be a Flex radio. And when it's remote, right now you can remote with VPN, and you got to jump through some hoops to do that. But in the future, by the end of this year, when version 2 comes out, it's going to be remote from anywhere in the world. There's a company in Montenegro, 4 Oscar 3 Alpha products, 403A. He has a genius line of equipment, and right now I have the Antenna Genius, and there's 2 outputs on my 6700 that goes to the 2 inputs, and I can select either output for one of 16 antennas. It will also control several relays, to control things in the shack, like foursquares and beverages and things like that. And there's other things that I don't have. There's a Rotor Genius, actually a little gizmo that fits on the boom on your antenna. So when you're remote, you know exactly where that beam is pointing. And so, if you lose power or lose calibration of your rotor, that's not a point because you know exactly where it's pointing with this stuff. And also there's a new amplifier that's coming out by the end of this year, maybe early next year, at least by Dayton time next year. That will be a full 1.5 kilowatts that will follow the Flex radios, and it's designed for remote. And all these radios, besides the antennas and the power and maybe the Keen mic and headset line, is a Cat5 cable to your router. That's all there is for cabling. It's very, very simple and easy to set up.
Well, let's turn this to some of the DXpeditions you've been on. You've been on some of these big DXpeditions. What do you think about the SDRs on those? Do you prefer using the SDRs, or do you like everything in one little box?
Well, as far as I know, in all of history, which is one DXpedition, that was Palmyra, we had 2 6500s, Flex 6500s, and 2 Maestros. And we had some other radios there, and we actually ended up fighting over who was going to use the Flex radios when our shift came up, because the noise mitigation and just the superior quality and ease of use, we really like that. Just a couple of weeks ago at Field Day, I had a big power supply and 3 flex radios. We just put them in the corner. We stacked them on top of one another, connected all the antennas to the back of them. And then in the room, we had 3 stations, 3 maestros, and they were all connected wirelessly to these radios. The only 2 cables we had on our little tables that we operated from were power supply cables for the maestro and for the computer. And that was it. Everything else, I mean, it makes it so simple, and it will really simplify the logistics of the DXpedition and all the wiring. It's really going to make a difference. And I foresee that this is going to, something like this, if not the flex radios, will be the standard for DXpeditions in the very, very near future.
Well, why don't you tell us about some of these? We mentioned some of the big DXpeditions that you've been on. Why don't you share a story or two about some of those DXpeditions with us?
Well, my very first DXpedition was the 1997 one to Heard Island, and that was an experience because it was a big DXpedition. It was remote, and that was a challenge. It was really a good team, and it was quite an experience. But one of my favorite ones, and I think all of the guys that went to the Kingdom of Bhutan in 2000 for the A5QA DXpedition still consider that one of their absolute highlights of DXing. It was, at the time, it was number 2 most wanted behind North Korea, which is still number 1. And I have worked for Orthopedics Overseas for many years, which is equivalent, basically like Doctors Without Borders, but for my specialty. And I've been to Bhutan many times. My family has lived over there. We homeschooled our kids, and we did homeschooling over there. So it was a good time. But anyway, in 2000, the Ministry of Communication changed the regulations, and they invited us for a DXpedition. We were there for 12 days, and we made 82,000 contacts with only 100 watts. And I think that's the expedition record that still stands today because we weren't allowed to use amplifiers. But Bhutan is a very remote place. You've heard of Shangri-La. That's really the description of Bhutan. It's up in the Himalayas, beautiful people, beautiful culture, and it's an amazing place. And I've kept in contact with many hams there. In fact, one family sent a son over to live with us for a year as an exchange student. And I'm looking forward to going back again. Another interesting story was Navassa Island. That took us at least 12 or 13 years to get permission to go. So we spent a lot of time getting there, just like we did Desiceo. But when we were there, it's near Haiti, and the Haitian fishermen are there just trying to eke out an existence. It's a very dangerous life. I'm sure many of them never get home if there's a storm. And just trying to feed their families and to survive is heartbreaking. When we left, we gave them all of our surplus food and water and all of our supplies. We literally gave them the shirts and hats off our back. And we really made their day. And, it was really a very good feeling to do something positive for these guys. They really appreciate it, even though we had a total language barrier. You could tell they were just in tears with appreciation.
Yeah, that sounds like some great adventures, and we can talk about those a little bit more when we come back. We're going to take some time to pay a couple of bills right now. We'll be back to take your calls with Glenn Johnson right after this word from Tower Electronics here on HamTalkLive.
This episode of HamTalkLive is brought to you by Tower Electronics. Tower Electronics has been the ham's dime store since 1978, bringing connectors, antennas, cables, and other parts to the world. Scott and Jill travel the country bringing their store to you at HamFest, but you can also order online at pl-259.com or by calling 920-435-2973. Stock up on those supplies like PL259 and end connectors, audio cables, mobile antennas, and ham sticks. Their silver-plated end connectors are even in use on the International Space Station. Tower Electronics is a dealer for MFJ, Comet, Daiwa, OPEC, Workman, and Ham Pro Technologies. Tower Electronics, online at pl-259.com, proud to sponsor this episode of Ham Talk Live.
Hey baby, what's your sign? What's your call sign?
Join the conversation. Call us on voice with Skype at HamTalkLive or give us a call at 812-NET-HAM1. That's 812-638-4261. Now, here's more Ham Talk Live.
Thanks again to Scott and Jill at Tower Electronics for sponsoring the show tonight so we can bring you Ham Talk Live. Coming up on their Hamfest schedule, they'll be at the Lowell, Michigan Hamfest on Saturday, and they're coming soon to Berryville, Virginia, and Huntington, West Virginia. Visit their website, pl-259.com, or give them a call at 920-435-2973. And don't miss Ham Talk Live every Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on HamTalkLive.com. And if you missed the show, you can download the podcast from the website or most popular podcasting services. It's time now for your calls. If you have a question for Glenn, give us an audio call at Ham Talk Live on Skype, or you can call us by telephone, of course. That number is 812-NET-HAM1, 812-638-4261. Give us a call, and we will pass this question over to Glenn. And if you want to ask him about the Flex radios, the software-defined radios, or some of the DXpeditions, why, give us a call, or you can tweet us at HamTalkLive and ask about those. So while we're waiting for the calls to come in here, Glenn, why don't you tell us about your exciting plans coming up for a future DXpedition?
Well, the big one is at least a year and a half, short 2 years away. That's number 2 on the most wanted list, which is currently Bouvet. Ralph K0IR announced last month a major DXpedition is going to take place at that time. And Nigel Jolly, the captain, owner of the Braveheart, in fact, who just got elected into the DX Hall of Fame at Dayton in May, has a bigger ship. And with that ship, we're going to take a helicopter and crew. There'll be 20 of us. We'll be gone away from home a couple months. Bouvet is not too far away from South Sandwich Island. It's to the east of South Sandwich, which has the most miserable weather on the planet. You can ask any of the recent BP-8 guys who were there, and they will tell you that they actually had to evacuate from the bad weather because of the bad weather. But Bouvet is surrounded by cliffs. It takes a helicopter landing, set up on a glacier, just kind of like what was done on Peter 1. Landing permission has been granted. A call sign has been issued. The website is just about done. It will be released here just in the next week or two. This is going to be a very challenging operation, and it's probably going to be one of the most expensive ones in a long time, just because of the logistics, its remoteness. Bouvet is said to be one of the most remote locations on the face of the earth, and just with the helicopter and the cost, it's going to be a challenge, not just logistically, but financially too.
And so I'm sure you'll have some links on there to help donate toward that once the website is up.
Well, you can count on that.
That's death, taxes, and donate to our cause. Is that
That's
the
right.
sure things? Well, that sounds like an adventurous expedition coming up, so we'll have to stay tuned for that one. 812-NET-HAM1 is the number. 812-NET-HAM1 if you have a question. And Glenn, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And Bouvet is going to be an all-flex operation. We've already been working on the logistics of that, and that's going to be an all-flex radio operation.
So we won't have to fight over who gets to use
We
it.
won't have to fight over the radios.
All right.
Some civility.
812-NET-HAM1 or tweet us at HamTalkLive or give us a call on Skype at HamTalkLive. Uh, what advice would you give for people on the other end, the people who are trying to work you on these DXpeditions? What advice would you give them to get through?
Well, there's two principles. Number one, the DXpedition is trying to work as many stations as possible. They want to get as many people in the log as possible. And on the other end, the DXer is trying to get into the DXpeditions log. And so, being efficient and learning how to get into the log is kind of is the challenge. And my advice is to listen. When you get tired of listening, listen some more. Listen to the rhythm of the operator, the timing, the pattern. How does he come back to people? How does he tune? Does he always move up? Does he move down? Does he go up and then down? Is it random? How does he tune? The more time you can spend listening to hear his pattern, you'll figure it out. And if you figure his pattern out, you know exactly where you can plant yourself and be heard. And we get notes, a lot of feedback after DXpeditions, and it's amazing the number of QRP signals, QRP stations, indoor antennas who say, I found your pattern and I was there when you tuned and you heard me. Or I was just off the edge of the pileup and you heard me. And, if we say listing up 5 to 10, 70% of the pileup is going to be 5 up and 30% is going to be 10 up. So go in between where there's nobody else. That's the easiest way to get into the DXpeditions log.
Oh, some great tips there for working those DXpeditions. And if you have a question about that, well, give us a call, 812-NET-HAM1, or you can tweet us or give us a call on Skype. It's HamTalkLive on either one of those. Your most recent trip was to Palmyra, and we had Craig Thompson on the show earlier, and we heard that the accommodations were better than most. So tell us a little bit about your experiences with Palmyra.
Paradise. That's the easiest way to describe it. When I got off the plane, it was like I've landed in the closest thing to heaven. I mean, it was just paradise. I mean, it was really, oh yeah, it can rain pretty hard, sometimes several inches a day, but when it's not raining, it is paradise. The problem is not everybody can go there. It's very restricted, and we were there because it was the off season. They have 3 quarters of intense research activity, and then 1 quarter, in this case, December, January, February, is their maintenance season. And they have a maintenance crew there of about a half a dozen guys. And so we were there during the lull for 2 weeks, and we helped out with the chores and helped with some of their work. And it was that was, I've been to Antarctica. I've been to Malpelo, which is probably the hottest place on the planet. Hard places, really challenging places. And now I've been to paradise. So I can say I've been everywhere.
Now, if you had to choose between the hot and the cold, which one for the expedition?
I could live in Palmyra. So, but that's not an option. But if I had a choice, that would be my favorite place to do the expedition again.
Very good. 812-NET-HAM1 if you have questions for W0GJ. 812-NET-HAM1 or tweet us at HamTalkLive. So as you plan out this new DXpedition, you're going to go all flex. Do you anticipate that there'll be anyone that will say, oh, wait a minute, why aren't we using this brand or that brand?
I think most of us at least have played with it, and there were several guys that were on Palmyra that are going to Bouvet, but it is, and I go on I've been on various DXpeditions, and we've used all different brands of radios. And, you know, when we're on a DXpedition, we just put our nose to the grindstone and work DX. And, you know, we make the best of whatever radio that is there. And sometimes there's some quirks to some of them. Sometimes some are prone to interstation interference. The nice thing about the Flex, even with high power, you can work 3 modes on one band at the same time. You know, there's no interference or desense like there is with superheterodyne radios. The mathematics see the strong nearby signals as noise and eliminate it before it's even decoded as a signal. So you can even do high power SO2R on one band if you have 2 different antennas for the same band, and enough separation. It is not your father's superheterodyne radio.
Very good, very good. Well, we wish you well on this the expedition coming up, especially the one you mentioned here, but all of those, and we thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about the SDRs and all your experiences, and congratulations on all your work, and best of luck in the adventures coming up.
Well, thank you very much, Neil. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. That is a wrap for this week's edition of Ham Talk Live. I'd like to thank my guest, Glenn Johnson, W0GJ, and all the callers and listeners out there in cyberspace, and invite you back next Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time when Nathan Nixon, N7NAN, will be here to talk about the National Tribal Amateur Radio Association, which promotes ham radio with Native American tribes. For a list of all of our upcoming guests, visit HamTalkLive.com. So for now, this is Neil Rapp, WB9VPG, saying 7375, and may the good DX be yours.